Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Team of the Grand Finals. You didn't think I was going to go to these Grand Finals without doing some sort of Team of the Week-like team, did you? It's been the Grand Finals. We've seen 4 teams in action: the Seoul Dynasty, Shanghai Dragons, Philadelphia Fusion and San Francisco Shock. We crowned the San Francisco Shock as our 2020 winners of the Overwatch League. And it's time to take a look back at what has happened this weekend and this week, or the previous week, and let's see who we think should be in this team of the Grand Finals. And of course, as always with the Grand Finals, you could just make it the San Francisco Shock. You wouldn't be so wrong, and it wouldn't be a bad team. But I'm sure we can alter that a little bit and try and make it a little bit better. And I am going to give it a damn good go. In this team of the Grand Finals, there will be some picks that may not be agreeable to everyone. As ever, if you have your own team of the Grand Finals, put it in the comments below. We can discuss it. It's not a problem. And there is quite a notable exclusion for this team, and I think a lot of people may be a little bit upset about it. But it'd be interesting to see. Anyway, so moving in to this Team of the Week then, or Team of the Week, oh, that's a force of habit, Team of the Grand Finals, we will be starting off with our supports as we always do. I mean, why would you start off with DPS? That's who get the accolades first usually, so let's leave them till last. Supports then, main support, and we haven't got a massive pool of players to choose from here. So when we're talking about this option, we're talking about Toby, we're talking about Moth, we're talking about Lee Jae-gon, and we're talking about Funny Astro. Now, Lee Jae-gon he's not getting here because he was awful for Shanghai during these playoffs at times, and it really showed. He really did. I don't want to say throw, that's the wrong word, but he really didn't perform to where he needed to be, and it was very controversial also what he did on Oasis to be so far forward and so almost inting like that is very weird. But moving on from that, we have Funny Astro. Now, honestly, I don't think Funny Astro was the reason that Philadelphia Fusion didn't do well. I don't think there was any one player that really stood out as trash for the Philadelphia Fusion. Only Sado perhaps didn't live up to what we expect of him. But I think mostly the Philadelphia Fusion was a coaching issue. I don't think Funny Astro was the best main support during this weekend, though. I really don't. It's odd to say that about him, because usually he's right up there, but I don't think he was quite better than the other two on the list. So Moss, he's going to get an honorable mention, which shows you which one I'm gone for. But Moss, he's always reliable for the San Francisco Shock. Really reliable. And he's a player they can always count on. Now, I had a feeling that they might let go of Moss at the end of the season and move to full Korean, which would mean letting go of Moss and letting go of Super. And I'm not so sure whether that's the route that the Shock are going to go down now. It is still possible. Moss has another Overwatch League winner's medal under his belt now, and he is one of the most decorated American players in history, so he's got a very prestigious record now, Moss, and I wonder if the Shock may want to keep hold of him. He's a very good figure and a very stable figure for the San Francisco Shock side, and it showed this weekend. You could always rely on Moss. You could always rely on Moss for the San Francisco Shock. Now, he's not like Violet. He's not pop-off. He's not going battle mercy like a lot of times, like you see perhaps even Funny Astro, Lee Jae-gon do. But Moss, he's a consistent main support. He's the backbone of this San Francisco Shock team. And a lot of the time, that's why we see him feature over Twilight. Now, a lot of people do say that Twilight's wasted on the bench for Shock, but I honestly think they believe that Twilight is only good in certain situations. Now, Twilight, obviously, the problem is with Twilight is he is sort of a replacement more for Violet than he is Moss. We've seen them play Violet Twilight, and we've seen them play Moss Twilight. And it always seems like the Shock are missing that little bit of backbone when Moss isn't in the side. That's something that's always bugged me when watching the Shock, that when they don't have Moss playing. I really do hope they kind of keep him on. For the Shock's sake, I think they kind of need him. And if not, they'll have to find someone to replace him, and that's not going to be easy. But it's not Moth who's getting this, it's Toby. And the reason I've given it to Toby is because of those points I've just said for Moss. But I think it's a bigger scale for the Seoul Dynasty. Toby is the last remaining Lunatic High player from on the Seoul Dynasty. Remember the days of the Ru Jae Hongs and the Zumbas and all that? It's gone now. Toby's the only remaining player from that side. He's the player with the most experience. Probably the most experience in the entire league. He knows the game inside out. He knows the game at all different levels. He's played in Apex, in the very earliest days of Apex, all the way to the Overwatch League. Now he's been to an Overwatch League Grand Finals. Yes, he didn't win it. And that's going to be agonizing for Toby. We remember him last year crying when they went out in the playoffs, but it's going to be agonizing for him to come so close. But Toby is a leadership figure in this Seoul Dynasty side. And something, again, I've noticed this season, and a lot of people I've seen saying this, why aren't Seoul Dynasty playing Slime? And the reason they're not playing Slime, twofold. Slime is not a leadership figure like Toby is. Toby is, I hate to say it, but like the dad of the Seoul Dynasty when he's playing. He is the elder of the group. He is the leadership figure. He's the person you can always look to for the calmness. He is what Ru Jae Hong used to be in the Seoul Dynasty. Not quite to that extent. Ru Jae Hong is a different level altogether. But he is what he used to be in that Seoul Dynasty side. But then, when you look at the meta right now, or what it was in those grand finals, Mercy is so prevalent. And we saw hardly any Lucio play. Now Slime has an incredibly good Lucio. He is a fantastic Lucio player, Slime. But his Mercy, I would not say is as good as Toby's. And I think Toby's Mercy has been really good during this weekend. I really do think so. And again, he is the player that the Seoul Dynasty can rely on. Now, without Toby, I think this Seoul Dynasty side tends to look unstable, is what I would say. I don't think they look as competent as they usually do with Toby in the side. So I think that's the reason why the Seoul have done so well during these playoffs. Because I think without Toby, they wouldn't have gotten nowhere near where they are. So this is why I'm giving it to Toby. Toby is consistent. Toby is a leadership figure. Toby is a lot of the reason why Seoul Dynasty got where they were. Yes, you can talk about how Profit popped off, Gesture popped off, Fits at times, but what goes under the radar a lot of the time is how well the supports do. And Toby, those players would not be able to do what they were doing without Toby backing them up. And Toby backed them up perfectly during this weekend. It is unfortunate that they come up against a team with the caliber of San Francisco Shock, and, you know, there's not much you can do about it. But moving on to our flex support, I talked a lot about main supports there, that's not good. But moving on to our flex supports, we have some honourable mentions. Alarm did well for the Philadelphia Fusion despite their results. Alarm was a bright spark for the Fusion side alongside Carpe. Apart from that, meh. Creative for the Seoul Dynasty. Now he's been a revelation during these playoffs and the grand finals. Creative really stepped up to the plate on the Ana. Really stepped up to the plate. We did see Bedosin sub in at times when they wanted to play more of a different style of Ana and more of a Zen. And that was great from Bedosin. Bedosin was playing well as well. But Creative is the backbone that the Seoul Dynasty have been relying on alongside Toby, and he's been doing great during these playoffs. Creative and Toby have been a fantastic support line, and it really has propelled the Seoul Dynasty forward, and it's enabling the rest of their team to do so much work. It's got them this far. But the flex support is going to go to Violet. I cannot give it to anyone else. Violet, he is so good. So good. Because you get him on that Zen, he can carry fights at times. Some of the anti-nades that we saw were phenomenal. It is crazy how high Violet's skill ceiling is. And Violet is a risk taker compared to someone like Alarm, and that's who we compare them usually to. We compare Alarm and Violet most of the time. Alarm is more consistent, but less of a risk taker. Violet is a risk taker. Violet is much more like Jonak was in the first season of the Overwatch League, and he got crazy value from it. His Zen was lethal, his Ana was lethal. San Francisco Shock, he was a massive pickup for the Shock roster, and he takes them to another level at every point when he needs to. So if Super doesn't come up with the pop-off, if Choi doesn't come up with the pop-off, then if Alms doesn't come up with a pop-off, if Striker doesn't come up with a pop-off, then it's Violet coming up with a pop-off. There's so much that the San Francisco Shock can fall back on that very often They're not found wanting in a fight because someone has done something mechanically fantastic that they just win. Forehead. So that's why Violet's in here. We move on to our off-tanks now though, a lot of mentions here. Marvel had a good weekend for the Seoul Dynasty. He really turned up, there was some iffy moments, but he really did turn up and he was able to match Choi Hyobin a lot of the time against the Shock. Void was consistent for the Shanghai Dragons. Unfortunately, the Dragons fell flat in other areas, which is, let's not talk about the support line, hey? But Void was certainly consistent and he showed the reason why he's got a roll start to his name this year. Also Fury. Fury, again, was not part of the reason why Philadelphia lost. Honestly, it's only Sado that stood out to me as a below par for the Fusion in terms of just individual player basis. It's just they got outplayed in terms of coaching and tactics and stuff like that. I can't say that enough for the Philadelphia Fusion. It's not any single one player's fault, apart from the fact that perhaps Sado was a bit lacking on the Roadhog. That's it. But I'm going to give this to Choi Hyobin. The reason I'm giving this to Choi Hyobin is because he's always consistent. He's always reliable for the San Francisco Shock. But what was fantastic about Choi Hyobin, the San Francisco Shock go into match against the Shanghai Dragons. And the Shanghai Dragons have been dominating this season in APAC against some very good teams. And they've been dominating and they have found so much success with Sombra. Sombra Reaper Dive, Sombra Tracer, Sombra Widow, Sombra Ashe. They have found so much success with Sombra this season in Shanghai. They walk into the first match on Oasis against San Francisco Shock and their Sombra gets nothing done. Lip is completely shut down. Why? Not because he's dying. Not because he's just getting freak headshots because of Alns. Not because Striker's taking him out. No, it's Choi Hyobin. It's Choi Hyobin at every turn denying Lip ult charge. He's not getting his EMPs, and that's what Sombra relies on. She is useless if she cannot build her ult quickly. It is EMP that drives Sombra, and if she can't build EMPs, she's useless. And Choi Hyobin made Lip useless during that map, and it forced Shanghai's hand. He kept pushing her away. He was stopping damage coming in when she was in the backline, and it meant Lip got nothing done. They lose Oasis, and it meant the whole style of Shanghai Dragons had to change. They could not rely on that Sombra, so then they got a little bit lost. They were wondering what to do. They end up moving to double sniper, which is what a lot of teams played. And I don't think Shanghai were perfectly prepared for that. I think they wanted to do more Sombra stuff, and thanks to Choi Hyobin, it was completely shut down. And they ended up moving to double sniper. They got a bit of a success with that, but in the end, it sees out a victory for the San Francisco Shock, and they never end up going back to it. So almost single-handedly, Choi Hyobin messed up the meta that Shanghai Dragons had been dominant with for so long. Single-handedly, one player. It is bonkers how crazy this player is at being able to shut down something so powerful for a team. And I think, honestly, it meant that the whole game plan for Shanghai Dragons had been completely messed up. And I think that's why they went 2-0 down against the San Francisco Shock before they got in at half-time and got to speak to Moon. And it's almost like the Shanghai Dragons were lost. And it was because of Choi Hyobin's play and his ability to shut down the flankers, the Sombras, those sorts of players that Shanghai Dragons have found so much success with. So this is why Choi Hyobin gets in there. And we move on to our main tank now, and I've got two mentions for this. One is Gesture. Gesture has been phenomenal during these playoffs, whether it's during the playoffs or during these grand finals. His Roadhog has been absolutely amazing. He has been, at every turn, a reliable source of picks for the Seoul Dynasty. He is one of the reasons why they have been propelled so far during these grand finals and the playoffs. But I honestly thought coming into these playoffs that Gesture might be the main tank who gets it, especially in this team of the week. And honestly, if they'd won the whole thing, I wouldn't have been putting it beyond him to get MVP. But it isn't Gesture, because someone stepped up to the plate who I didn't think would. This is Super. So Super, I've complained about Super in the past, about him being a Reinhardt one-trick. He's not the Reinhardt one-trick. He hasn't got the brilliant Winston. That's why we see quite a bit of Smurf for the San Francisco Shock. Smurf's Orisa is better as well. But generally when we see Reinhardt, we see Super subbed in. But this has changed during these playoffs and during this grand final, where we've seen Super come in for the Roadhog. And then alongside him, if they're playing Roadhog Wrecking Ball, it'll be Super Smurf. If they're playing Roadhog Sigma or Roadhog Diva, something like that, it'll be Super and Choi Hyobin. And Super, he got amazing value on the Roadhog. It's undeniable the amount of value Super got. And there had been talk about him grinding Roadhog on stream, that he'd been really good at it, and I had my doubts whether he could transfer that to a league level. I was wrong. I was really wrong. He really did transfer it. He matched, if not outplayed, Gesture in the grand final. He absolutely pummeled Stand 1 against the Shanghai Dragons. He really, really did. It wasn't pretty. It really wasn't. And he was never outplayed. He was only ever the better player or being matched. And the only player I think that matched him was Gesture. Fearless and Stand 1 couldn't do it for the Shanghai Dragons. And we didn't get to see Super versus Sado. So it's testament to Super. He grinded the hog and he did very, very well. And he was an MVP candidate for the grand finals. And he rightfully was, even though he's never going to let anyone forget it. He was an MVP candidate in my opinion. He didn't get it in the end, but he was fantastic, and he does sneak this over Gesture, which is a little bit of a surprise. I wouldn't have said that before this weekend. Yeah, interesting. So moving on to the DPS then, and this is where it gets really controversial, because these two mentions are going to be Striker and Prophet. Now, Striker is our MVP for the finals. Striker was phenomenal for the San Francisco Shock, and what is great about Striker is a lot of the time we thought of him as a Tracer player. And he comes out on Hanzo and he wrecks face, which was amazing to see. This is what we want to see from Striker. A bit more of that varied hero pool, a bit more of that unpredictability. And him alongside Ans playing double sniper was phenomenal for the Shock. And he didn't need to do anything different. They didn't need to sub anyone else in. So it's testament to that. I'm not giving it to Striker though. And that may be controversial. I'm not giving it to the MVP of the grand finals. No, I'm giving it to Prophet. And the reason I'm giving it to Prophet is because I think Prophet was fantastic. Every single time it's a fight, you see Prophet get a kill, right? It doesn't matter whether the Soul Dynasty are losing the fight. Prophet still gets a pick. He still gets a kill. Every single fight. Without fail. It is crazy. Prophet, he also is so clutch at times. It is bonkers. We have seen a lot of clutch plays, but Prophet, he takes the biscuit at times, it really does. And the reason I've given it to Prophet over Striker is because I believe Prophet matched Striker a lot of the time. And the reason I've given it, the reason it's pushed me towards Prophet is because Prophet was more versatile than Striker. Prophet switched to Pharah and Genji at times. And what stands out to me is what point Gibraltar against the Shock in the grand final. When the Soul Dynasty were 2-1 down, they needed a really great Gibraltar, and they got one. And the reason they did is because they decided to change things up. Ans on the Widow was getting so much value at the start of that map. They needed to do something. So what happens? Prophet goes over to the Genji. Something we saw only once during the entire grand finals weekend, and that was during that map. We saw Genji. And he gets to Genji, he pressures out Ans gets shut down, they get a 3-point, and then they get a full hold. Soul Dynasty are straight back in with a 2-2. It's that sort of adjustment that I don't think Striker would be able to do. Striker has a Genji, but he wouldn't be able to match Prophet in my opinion. Then we saw Prophet pick up the Pharah at times as well. And that has been a fantastic pick for him during the playoffs. And he also showed great play on that as well. So the reason I've given it to Prophet over the Grand Finals MVP Striker is because I think Prophet was more versatile, and he still got the same amount of value, if not more value than Striker at times. So this is why I've given it to Prophet, and I hope that explains why. Honestly, Striker could easily have got this, but the reason I've given it to Prophet is just because of that versatility, and that it wasn't necessarily his decision, but I had a feeling it was, that he switched to that Genji and he got the value, and it stopped the role that the Shock were on during Watch Punch or Ultra with Ans just getting so much value on the Widowmaker. So that's why I'm giving this to Prophet. Then we go to our other DPS, and this is our final pick, and this is again going to be a controversial one, because I'm giving an honourable mention to Ans, but I'm not giving it to Ans. Now Anson Sniper, I wish he kept his old name. I wish he just Anson Sniper is such a great name. Ans is just, it feels like I'm saying half a sentence. So he was great for the Shock. Fantastic, and he was crying at the end of this grand finals, and it's quite obvious that he was very emotional. He, back in Korea, when he was part of Korean Contenders before he retired, was called a Widowmaker one-trick, not good enough. He was a one-trick, he should just stick to streaming, blah blah blah, he'll never be successful, blah 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 blah. And here he is, winning the Overwatch League. The highest accolade you can get in Overwatch esports. And it's a testament to his nature and to his grinding. He's a fantastic Widowmaker, he's a fantastic Ashe, and I think he's very much deserved of his title now. But there was a lot of clutch plays from players this weekend. Ans, no exception to that. But I think DM had more clutch than Ans. So DM played for the Shanghai Dragons this weekend, and it was a bit of a surprise. We hadn't seen DM all this season, really properly. DM is like a Widowmaker specialist, and we saw him dominate in the Widow 1v1 tournament in All-Stars. And we know how good of a Widowmaker DM is. So DM comes in, plays Ashe and Widowmaker for the entire series that the Shanghai Dragons played during these finals, and he looked great. I honestly think he was the best player on the Shanghai Dragons by quite a little bit, actually. I don't think anyone else could really live up to what he was doing. He was matching every Widowmaker he went up against pretty much, and there are several points for the Shanghai Dragons when they were completely out of a fight, or the fight hadn't even begun, and they don't need to take a fight because DM has just gone and got 3 or 4 picks. 3 or 4 picks! And completely wiped the enemy team off the map. And if you've got something as powerful as that it can just get you raw mechanical picks, where you don't have to expend abilities, you don't have to expend ults, you don't have to expend anything, you just end up, basically you CSGO a point. You just get that raw mechanical aim, and you just click them heads. If you've got something like that, and Ans did a similar thing for the San Francisco Shock, you've got things like that, then you are on a path to success. The Shanghai Dragons, I believe, did so poorly. Well, I say so poorly. They didn't do as poorly as the Philadelphia Fusion. But the reason I think the Dragons struggled so much is because their support line was lacking. I don't think their DPS were lacking. I think they adjusted to double sniper. They ended up playing DM and Lip, and it worked. It was getting value against the Shock. But I think their support line lacked. DM was really good this weekend, and I want to give it to him. I know Ans was also very good, and I think these two players are on a level pegging for this spot. Honestly, if you were going to give it to Ans over DM, I would have no complaints whatsoever, and vice versa. So I'm going to give it to DM, but I'm not saying Ans is bad. I'm saying Ans is just as good. I just think DM had a little bit more of an impact on how the Shanghai Dragons did than Ans having an impact on how the Shock did. I think Striker had a big impact on how good the Shock did, and so did Super, whereas DM, he was much more relied upon by the Shanghai Dragons, is what I'm saying. But that is the last team I will be picking for this season of the Overwatch League. The team of the Grand Finals: Toby, Violet, Choi Hyobin, Super, Prophet, and DM. Oh boy, it's been a long season of Team of the Weeks and team of the tournaments and Team of the Grand Finals and Team of the Playoffs and whatever else you want to say. It's been a long season. This has been a 25-minute video, so this is a long video as well. But it's nice to go a little bit more in depth about this, considering it's the Grand Finals. We are not stopping here, but it has been a fantastic run for Team of the Week this year. I'm very happy with it. There may be another one coming up very soon. It will be the definite last one. But It has been phenomenal this year, and I can't wait to do more of these Team of the Weeks when it comes around in 2021 for that season. There is plenty more Overwatch League content coming your way on this channel. Please do hit the sub button and everything to make sure you stay informed, and the bell. I never say the bell. I always forget the bell. The stupid bell. Make sure you hit the bell. Yeah, do that. I'm turned into one of those YouTubers. Oh god. Let's move on, shall we? But I'm going to leave it here. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.